Now before we get started, let's get a few important details out of the way. All photos taken in the test are with auto settings and scene optimizer on. Also, both phones are of the Snapdragon CPU variety, and their latest respective softwares. Now, into the specs. Taking a look at the main sensors, this year's Galaxy S22 features a larger 50 megapixel sensor, which is an improvement over last year's S21. The S10e sports a 12 megapixel sensor. Taking a closer look at the ultrawides, the S10e has a 16 megapixel ultrawide with a 123 degree field of view. The S22 has a 12 megapixel ultrawide with a 120 degree field of view. Even though the megapixels are smaller on the S22, it is worth noting that the S22's sensor is a larger sensor. This year, the S22 also features a brand new 3x optical 10 megapixel lens. This is an improvement over last year's 64 megapixel digital zoom lens that was present on the S21. A dedicated zoom lens is not present on the S10e. And while the front-facing camera is not tested in this test, they are both a 10 megapixel sensor, and in my experience, there's not too much of an improvement between the two. Now let's get into the samples. Taking a look at the daylight indoor images, the Galaxy S22's images are slightly brighter and have more detail in the shadows with less grain and noise. The S10e's photos do hold up well, but the S22 is definitely more capable of processing darker shadows with less noise. As seen in this cat here and the pinecone image, it's also known that the new 50 megapixel sensor on the S22 is capable of capturing far more detail and sharpness, with the Galaxy S10e feeling a little soft when the light gets a little bit low. Moving to the outdoor daylight photos, both cameras hold up extremely well, but something that I noticed is that the S22 features far more color accurate and true to life colors, with the S10e opting for more saturated greens and saturated blues in the sky. This is most visible in the picture of the volleyball net, with the sand looking more orange and the sky more blue. Also, in the pinecone image, it is also visible that the S22 was able to capture far more detail, sharpness, and more accurate colors. Looking at the high dynamic range images, it is visible that both phones perform extremely great in these high backlit, extremely challenging images. The Galaxy S22 is more capable of producing more accurate colors, and also maintaining more details and less flaring around the sun. Also, the Galaxy S10e can lose a lot of contrast and look a little bit flat compared to the S22, as it is not as capable of filtering out direct sunlight into the camera lens. But overall, both are great performers. Moving on to the zoom category, this is where the Galaxy S22 really starts to shine. The S22 maxes out at 30x, where the S10e maxes out at 8x. Also, the 30x quality on the S22 is actually greatly improved and actually quite usable this year. The S10e can look a little soft and fuzzy at 8x, but that's just to be expected without a zoom lens. The most impressive of all these images is this moonshot. Starting at wide and zooming into 8x and then max, the S22 can just zoom in so much farther and has a cool little software trick where it recognizes it's the moon and creates a nice, pleasant image with darker backgrounds and more pleasing colors. Looking at the ultrawide images, both phones are capable of getting a lot in the frame, with the S10e getting a slight bit more in the frame with its wider, 3-degree wider lens. Once again here, the S22 goes for a more true-to-life looking colors that are a little bit less saturated than the S10e. Also, both cameras are phenomenal in their terms of quality and sharpness. Although it's worth noting that with the S22 having a larger physical sensor size for the ultrawide, it will shine more in low light situations than it does here in these daylight images. Looking at the portrait mode images, this year Samsung put a lot of work into improving the edge detection, and now it's able to clearly detect small frays of hair and small things to cut out of the background. This is most visible in this squirrel example, where the S22 was able to cut out small frays of hair sticking out from the tail, where the S10e has a harsher cutoff around the tail, not being able to detect specific hairs. Overall, the portrait mode on the S22 is greatly improved this year. Now looking at the low-light images, the S10e can still hold its ground pretty well indoors, keeping noise and grain to a low, although the S22 with night mode on is capable of collecting a lot more light due to its larger sensor. Looking at these outdoor images, both phones actually perform quite well, creating pleasant and decent images, with night mode not improving too much. Looking at this image of a pine tree, it is visible though that the S22 is able to capture more light and far more detail, with the image looking less soft and having a lot less grain. Although it's worth noting that the colors on both are not too accurate, but that's as expected because this image was extremely dark, so it's really just pulling out of what it could get. Here with this photo of a lantern, it's quite visible that I actually prefer the S10e's photo. It's brighter and in my opinion has more detail. I did take multiple photos, and the S22 just seemed to want to expose the lantern more properly rather than brighten up the image as a whole. Finally, moving into this last night shot really shows just how far the cameras have come on the S22. Looking at this image at night without night mode on, it's pretty decent. There's a little bit more light in the S22 image, but they both look great. But when turning on night mode, the S22 is able to capture an absolutely incredible amount of light, and there's an absolutely massive difference here. The S10e's is just barely more light, but that is just showing the limitation of the sensors. The S10e can't get images much brighter than this, as shown in previous images as well. The S22 has a lot more headroom, so exposing for 5 seconds in both these images, the S22 can capture far more light due to its larger sensors that are just a lot more relevant. Overall, I would say that this night image in particular is most congruent with my experience at night. This really captures just how much of an improvement the S22 is at night. In conclusion, both phones' cameras are incredibly reliable in scenarios with a lot of light. The S22 gains a substantial edge over the S10e in zoom this year, with its new 3x optical zoom lens being a step up even over last year's great Galaxy S21. The S22 is also noticeably more capable in low light scenarios, with its all-around larger sensors and advanced image processing. While the S10e can most definitely hold its own 3 years later, there's no denying that the S22 is just more well-rounded, performing exceptionally well in all categories, thus taking the edge in this comparison. But just one note, I want to make a quick, little, small conclusion on the S10e. The S10e still has a phenomenal camera that performs great, and honestly, if you just take photos on an everyday of your family and your pets, it's a fantastic camera. The S22 is just really what reaches that flagship level performance to compete with phones like the iPhone. But the S10e is definitely no slouch, and I definitely would not take it off your bucket list if you're looking at the phone still. Anyways, that's all, and thank you for watching.